Hi everyone, welcome back to our FE Cash Calc tip series. This tip is going to be on the gross modeler in FE Cash Calc. A bit of a word of warning if you are watching this from overseas and/or don't use the UK tax system with your clients, then stop watching. This is a UK feature only. So carry on watching some of the other tips. The vast majority of our tips are obviously for everyone, but this one specifically is UK only. And for those of you that are watching from the UK or again use the UK taxation system with your clients, you may be unaware, hence why you're watching this video, that there are two types of modeler in FE Cash Calc. There's a net version and the gross version. And as of today in 2025, the vast majority of cash flows are still run on a net basis. So 60 to 70% of all cash flows are run net. However, the gross model is becoming more and more popular. And the main difference, a good way of explaining this, is if I'm working with a prospect and their income is say 50,000, using the net modeler, I won't put in 50,000 because I've clearly got to account for the tax. So I'm going to be putting in their take-home pay, which might be 40,000. Whereas the gross model, I don't need to worry about that. I can just tell the system that my prospect earns 50,000, and it knows the taxation regime underneath, and it will then just work that out for me, and then just essentially use 40,000 moving forward. It's a good example because ultimately the outcome will be the same. The cash flow model is on both occasions on the net and gross going to be using 40,000 income. It's just the way that I'm interacting with it is slightly different. I'm not having to do much of the heavy lifting with the gross modeler because it works it out for me. And that's why, because of the path of least resistance, we imagine the gross model will just become increasingly more popular because the inputs and the way you're using it just involves you doing slightly less work. And we will, over the coming months and years, we'll be adding more and more features and more nice to haves to it as well. Now, how do I access the gross modeler? Well, when you click on the cash flow tab at the very top here under any particular client, you've got the ability to toggle between net and gross basis at the very top here. And equally, when you create a brand new forecast, you'll notice that same toggle here. Do you want to do a net or a gross? Now, the default will always be net, but if you click on gross, this is a gross cash flow that I've created with a client recently. So I'm just going to use this to explain how the gross model works. And you can see straight away that the look and feel has been adjusted and changed slightly. So you've now got two kind of tabs on the left-hand side. On the net model, you only have one. So you've got the headline tabs, inputs and timeline, the cash flow model, stress testing, yearly breakdown, and create report. And you'll notice under inputs and timeline, you've got lots of different tabs that you can work your way through to start adding in all the necessary data that the cash flow is going to need to then generate the forecast underneath. And you'll see the tabs themselves have been separated. So whereas the net modeler, you have incomes and expenses, you have contributions and withdrawals. Well, they have their own tab in the gross modeler, and most of these tabs have been altered in some way. So let's work our way from the top down. So under assumptions, the main change here is you've now got essentially three measurements of inflation, or CPI, RPI, and average earnings increase. The reason for that is because the triple lock with the state pension. So we need those three measurements. So we're going to be using this by default, but you can adjust that if necessary. People and timeline look a little bit busier than before. So now you've got the separate, in this case, it's him and her. So Keith Baker and his wife, Barbara Baker, and you can specify what country of residence they live in. And therefore that's going to take the relevant tax regime of the country of residence that they operate in. And then the lump sum allowance LSA used before the forecast, you can specify a value in there. And equally the money purchase annual allowance, has that been triggered before the forecast starts? And if it has, you can just simply tick that on or off. Everything else is the same though, in terms of the timeline features and the ability to set a risk profile. Savings and investments has changed a bit. You'll notice with the net modeler, when you want to set a different liquidation order, you can just drag the pots up and down, and then you've got arrows on the right hand side that you can move them up and down as well. In this case, whenever you're adding a pot, you can just simply set a pot liquidation order at the top, and you've still got the same drag and drop feature over here, and equally the arrows on the right. So if you do want to reset the liquidation order in terms of when the cash flow starts taking from these pots, that's how you do it. When you click on add savings and investment pot, the core difference here is you can specify an owner for that particular pot, but equally you can categorize the pot as well. So maybe this is X, Y, and Z pot, and I want to specify that it is an ISA, is a GIA, onshore bond, offshore bond, or unwrapped investment. Also, a nice little additional touch under the growth rate. You've still got the ability to add a linear or variable rate, but you'll notice a nice little graphic underneath actually showing what that rate is. Particularly useful when you're doing a variable rate. It shows you that variability, what you're going to be using if you then apply that to that particular pot. So they're the core changes under savings and investments. Pensions had a couple of changes as well. So you can see that it's divided it between the state pension and the DC pension. So if I wanted it in the same liquidation pot order option as well, but if I click on add DC pension, you'll see the core difference here is, again, you can specify the owner, but equally it assumes that the pension is going to be fully uncrystallized, whatever value you put in there. But if that's not the case, you can deselect and you can then specify the value of the pot that still remains uncrystallized. And again, that will record that in the background when it's forecasting. Equally under incomes, this is probably the tab that's had the most amount of changes. When you click on add an income, again, a bit busier, a bit more option. So you can categorize the income at the top here, whether it's an employment income or other type of income. Again, specify the owner of that income, the description, but then there's 3 different types of employment income. If it's employed, you just simply pop in the gross salary, any bonuses, any benefits of kind each year. And again, that's going to be recorded in the background when it cash flows. Self-employed, fairly similar, just pop in the gross profits. And company director, you just add in the gross salary and or gross dividends, and again that records that in the background. It understands the tax that client's going to be paying off the back of these figures, and that will then record that correctly on the cash flow for us. And if it's other income, similar kind of options at the very top, but then you specify whether that's going to be taxable or non-taxable. If it is taxable, is it earned income like property income, or is it dividend income? And again, that will pull in the correct taxation rates for you for those types of income. Expenses have been changed slightly, so we can now specify whether that type of expense is essential, lifestyle, or discretionary. So when you click on add an expense, you've got that priority order here. Essentially, it's just heating and eating, the stuff that basically keeps us alive. If it's a lifestyle expense, it's the type of expenses that keep our lives comfortable. Discretionary expense would be when you're buying your Lambos or buying a property, that's discretionary spend. And you'll see this in a couple of minutes when we go into the cash flow image. It actually shows those different lines for you. It shows you the overall expense, but it will show you all of your expenses that equate to essential, lifestyle, etc. So they're the changes we've made for expenses. Contributions hasn't really changed, nor has charges and fees. Withdrawals have, though. When you add a withdrawal now, you can click on quick add and add PCLS, UF plus withdrawal, or Flexi Access drawdown, and the system will record that in the background. So it will then therefore recognize how much of that tax-free allowance you still have, and it will record that as the cash flow matures and gradually evolves over time. So as you can see, the input fields have changed quite significantly. Again, adding more information in here potentially, but then allowing the cash flow to do all that heavy lifting once you've added it in. And then when you click on the cash flow model, the changes here, the cash flow model, the savings over time hasn't really changed too much. There is a nice little feature that allows you now to basically deselect various pots. You can see what this looks like. For example, if I took away the Aviva pot completely and just had a look at the other stuff, or I can hide all of them and slowly bring them back. The money in, money out chart hasn't really changed much, other than obviously, again, you can deselect the different incomes at the bottom and they'll disappear. But the added extra here is you've got those 3 lines. Now I've got my hard line, flat line at the very top there showing me my overall expenses, but it's just a nice little touch to be able to see where those essential expenses lie and where those total expenses, where the essential and lifestyle expenses lie as well underneath. And again, I can deselect those if I don't want to use them, etc. The biggest difference, though, we've made to this particular page is the taxes. Because we're working out the taxes in the background, we can now plot that on a nice little chart. So I've got year-on-year breakdown, him and her. Again, I can deselect them at the very bottom, but him and her, how much taxes are being paid by our couple each year. And if you just simply hover over each bar, it will tell you in bold, in blue at the very bottom there, what that bar equates to, and then all the other taxes that are being paid by that couple as well at the very top. Yearly breakdown has been changed slightly as well. Still quite a busy page with all of the data being used to generate the cash flow. But because there's more data being used to generate that cash flow, particularly with the taxes, you'll notice when you open up any one of these tabs, you've got the money in, money out, liquid assets, people and insights options at the very top. And when you click on money in, you've got all of the necessary information about the income coming in this case, the employment income, and then all of the tax information as well, how much tax is being paid. And you'll notice as well with this particular client, earning over 100,000, the personal allowance has been tapered down accordingly. So even that's been taken into account. And where things like that are triggered, that the cash flow is doing something maybe slightly, dare I say, out of the ordinary, you will get a little insights tab as well up here, little light bulb pop up, and just making you aware and anchoring you to the kind of the knowledge that it has done something slightly different in this case. And in this case, the client's personal allowance has been tapered down. So that's quite useful. Where that has happened, you'll get a little light bulb pop up. And then finally, create reports for fairly similar. It will just allow you to aggregate all of those inputs and cash flow images into one nice report at the very end. So that's our gross cash flow modeler. As I mentioned at the very start, we will be adding more and more little features to this over the coming months and years. So keep an eye out on future tips. But as I keep stressing as well, look, the outcome should be the same. Whether you're using the net or gross, there's no right or wrong to this. The final cash flow image should be the same, but arguably, hopefully, you've seen there the gross model is just doing a lot of the work for you. So that's why we expect it to become quite popular over the coming years. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.